Well, we begin with a story that is gaining national attention and reigniting a fierce debate on parental rights in our nation's schools. Melissa Calhoun, who you're looking at here, teaches at Satellite High School in Brevard County, Florida, and she will not have her contract renewed after she is accused of violating state law and referring to a student by their preferred name without parental consent. Now, Brevard County District spokesperson sent this statement to Outnumbered. It tells the story. Brevard Public Schools was made aware that a teacher at Satellite High School had been referring to a student by a name other than their legal name without parental permission. When the parent reached out to us, this directly violates state law and the district's standardized process for written parental consent. BPS supports parents' rights to be the primary decision makers in their children's lives, and Florida law affirms their right to be informed. After the accusation was made, the district conducted a detailed investigation, and based on the teacher's own admission that she knowingly did not comply with state statute, she received a letter of reprimand. Teachers, like all employees, are expected to follow the law. The teacher is working under a 10-month contract that expires in May 2025. They went on to say, since the state will be reviewing her teaching certificate based on these actions, the district decided not to renew the annual contract until the issue is resolved with the state. Now, this decision appears to be the first of its kind in reaction to a Florida law signed by Governor DeSantis. Thousands have signed a petition in support of Calhoun, and some students have staged a walkout in protest, calling on district leaders to reverse the decision immediately. Ms. Calhoun has not responded to our request for comment. Ari, Brevard County says this is supporting parents' rights to be the primary decision maker in their children's lives. And I maintain that's a pretty good place to start, with parents being primary decision makers, not state and government.
Yeah, there is no question that the parents are the ones who should decide what their children's names are. Children up to 18. And if a child wants to go by a different name, that doesn't obligate the school teachers to do what the child says. They should do what the parents say. No question about that. But I want to make another point. When it comes to whether or not this teacher should be disciplined, reprimanded, etc., leave it to the people who know the teacher. I'm not qualified to say what should or should not happen to that person. Maybe they're a great teacher and this is one strike and that's all they have. Maybe she's a terrible teacher and this should tip her over the edge. I don't know, but I don't like people from outside saying, fire her, fire her. None of us know the individual, I don't know the individual circumstances of this woman's background and everything else. And one last point. I hope people lower the temperature on this. Very often, these kids who want to change their name, often to something gender neutral, something along those lines, they've got a lot going on in their lives. And I hope people don't make this about that kid and really put pressure on that kid. The parents should get the say, but all these issues are very sensitive to the child involved, and I hope people lower the temperature and respect the child.
And I would note Brevard County would say, we didn't fire her, we didn't renew her contract. They maintain there's a difference there. But, Emily, when I think about this, I think about some of the other stories that we've covered on this couch for so many years. I think about California, where there was someone, an individual child, who changed their gender at school. This was after teachers put her into these equality clubs, changed the gender. The parent was kept out of the loop for a very long time. And then finally, the parent gained knowledge of what was happening, and the child actually resolved the issues with the parents' involvement, and it was a loving outcome. I think about Florida, where another parent said they were kept in the dark, and their child went on to attempt suicide in the school bathroom. So there are these slippery slopes where parents need to be involved, they need to be kept informed, and these parental secrecy policies, like in New Jersey and elsewhere, are very harmful and damaging to children emotionally when you have a loving parent involved.
And I think to that point, the dark area is not necessarily, what the child is going through, which you're right, it is, but it's the secrecy element. Cloaking the child, preventing the parents from understanding what's going on in the child is when it becomes so dangerous. And for there to be such a divergence between the school and the parents, the child's identity at school with the parents having no idea, think about how many hours, truly the majority of the child's life, if they are enrolled in a school like that, is in the hands of others. So the thought that the parents would be willfully kept from a decision or that their request be ignored, I think that's an ephemeral acquiescence to the to the transient nature of these kids' whims. And when we look at this, I think the message it sends is so important, which is that Florida is saying this teacher, her contract ended. We've decided not to renew it. It's at-will employment, by the way. There can be a million reasons why you choose not to renew. What they do is perfectly legal. The message they send is that if you do not comply with Florida state law, that will be one of the reasons why we choose not to re-up your contract. And when we look at who's protesting her contract not being renewed, all those kids. Yeah, of course. Of course, all the kids that are participating in this transient fad will be like, oh, the teacher saw me. Guess what? It's in your best interest that the parents know what's going on. And when you fold that into the larger conversation of now a parent refusing to call a child by their name or their decided new gender, that could be considered coercive custody. That can be an articulable reason that the parent is deemed unfit for custody. For example, in a state like Colorado, the whole point is Florida saying, not here, not on my watch, and God bless them for sticking to their guns.
Kennedy, and there's a lot we don't know. You know, I tried to dig down in a ton of articles, and we know kind of surface level. We have not heard from Miss Calhoun. We know, according to Brevard County, that she knowingly did not comply. She received a letter of reprimand. I want to know, is this an intentional act of defiance? The county's saying yes. I want her side of the story. Again, we don't know everything.
No, but whatever happened here, so you already make her into a folk hero. And, you know, it's so both sides have essentially what they want. Like the more conservative side has a scalp, but the progressive side, they're like, you know, here's this brave Joan of Arc who stood up against the establishment and, you know, had a personal relationship with the child and honored what they wanted. My worry is they're really crappy teachers in a lot of public schools across the country. And by all accounts, she was actually a good teacher, and the kids loved her. They did feel connected to her. And, you know, one of the parents says, it just takes one teacher to change your life for the better, and she was that one teacher. And if that's the case, I wish there were another way of going about this than just making her an example, because I'm getting sick and nauseated and disgusted by all the stories I've been reading lately about female teachers who are having sex with their students. And it's like, that's a level of inappropriateness that should never be normalized. If this teacher's a good teacher, you have to figure out a way to get the good teachers to stay in schools, but also, you know, to Emily's point, to work with the parents. Yeah. They have to work with the parents at some point. And, you know, to Ari's point, these massive swings from one end to the other, they don't serve the kids ultimately in the long run. So there has to be a more nuanced way of doing this.
Yeah, I think that's well said. You know, Cheryl, again, there are exceptions, but a base starting point is most parents love their children more dearly than a government ever will. There are exceptions, obviously, and we all know that exist. But starting with the parent is always a good place to start.
It is. And you know, I'm glad that Lisa mentioned the fact that these parents, many of them are the ones that are out there saying that this is not an example of a teacher that should be fired. And I want to trust the parents' voices in this as well, to your point. And then if you look at the law, and she did knowingly say it, admit in the investigation. We know that she defied the law and she knew what she was doing. At the same time, it wasn't, from my understanding, it wasn't child endangerment. It wasn't criminal. It wasn't a crime. It wasn't the safety and was the child suicidal over a name. It doesn't seem like that's the case in this particular instance. It was that it was a name. Look, I would have liked to have been Carol, not Cheryl, but it is what it is in my life, right? But if it's something like that, I can understand where the teacher was trying to think of the feelings and be respectful of the child.
I tried to change my name to Waterfall my senior year in high school. And I tried to make people do this when they called me Waterfall. It didn't stick.
Cool.
I'll call you Waterfall.
This is tough. This is tough.
Yeah, well, Emily, as you noted, at-will employment, and, you know, you're not entitled to a new contract. So we will follow the details. There are certainly more to come.
Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.